Hello, everyone. I'm Joshua Habersky with the Premium Cigar Association. I'm here joined by my colleague Glenn Loop. We want to update everyone in our monthly video series on things going on in the advocacy realm, but also in the larger association sense. Recently got back from a presentation at the TAA for both the general membership and the associate members. We had a lot of great discussions about everything going on from the situation in Nicaragua to California to state taxation. And we're implementing a lot of that feedback into our programs and advocacy initiatives as we move forward. Um, I do want to highlight two things outside of the advocacy realm as we start to enter the month of November. One, we have the World Cigar Show coming up in Dubai with a full conference schedule. Our colleague in the international and education side, Ricardo Caroni, has done a really great job in getting speakers. We have nearly 60 exhibitors, over 1,500 attendees on just the World Cigar Show side, and some incredible social events. Those social events were announced last week. Rayad from the Leaf Master. Those are on our website, as well as the attendees getting the emails about registering for those social events that are going on after hours outside of the trade show itself. The other important thing going on in November is our master class with FIU. That will be happening on their campus November 19th through the 21st. Really excited, and we're going to be announcing all of the different speakers. I know that some of them have been already announced, but the full schedule of events is near finalized at this stage. We have some great products that we'll be showcasing with La Aurora for the tasting portion, the last day of rum, cigars, and chocolate. And then we also would like to thank I will hold a special thing, but we are going to be giving a travel humidor cutter and lighter with Lotus. So that is something that we're also very excited to give each of the students participating in the course one of those. So I know that we are nearly full in our registration for that first master class. Glenn, I think I'll turn it over to you on the states, and I'll clean up on some of the issues on the federal front and international front.
Thanks, Josh. What we want to emphasize right now is what we proverbially call the crystal ball. There's a number of issues that we know of that will be coming up in the states. We're rapidly coming up on our state legislative season, where over half of the state legislatures in America will simultaneously go into session. This is a very different political time compared to most years past, at least in terms of the last several years post COVID, in that I'll characterize it as this: the threat level is high. Because of actions in Washington and because of issues that, shall we say, are way over our pay grade with regard to Medicaid mandates, the fear factor is high with regard to the potential for tax increase proposals throughout the country. Many states, for example, my home state of Virginia, is looking at a Medicaid mandate hole of probably coming close to $2 billion. We know what happened in Indiana last year when they had a hole of $1 billion and enacted a tax increase. So we're all going to have to be diligent and pulling our coalitions together to ward off potential tax proposals throughout the country. But what I'm going to do is go through a punch list of states that are either in an active mode, have active legislation, or the probability is high on legislation that we anticipate both good, bad, and indifferent. What I'll do is kick off with recent testimony that we provided in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Several weeks ago, I testified to a committee against proposed tax increases that would double the OTP tax in Massachusetts from 40% to 80%. These were just hearings. We were joined by a coalition that represents tobacco interests, if you will. Um, and then there was the host of what we call the body parts lobby that were adamantly supportive of those tax increases. And we represented in testimony to the committee how damaging this would be to the small business community of Massachusetts. Then last week, I provided testimony for two pieces of legislation, and this is my proverbial visual aid time, where we supported legislation that would universally recognize 21 as, for lack of a better term, adulthood. A bill that was really prompted by the Massachusetts Retail Association, which is, not it's positive that it came out of a group that's not purely representative of tobacco political interests, if you will. So it would recognize 21 as the age for tobacco, for cannabis, for gaming, for alcohol, saying if you're old enough to serve in the military, get married, sign a contract, be serve on a jury, you're old enough to purchase these products that are already legal throughout the rest of this country. So that was a unique piece of legislation, and there possibly is going to be a vote held in November on those House and Senate bills. And we have petitions on cigaraction.org for those pieces of legislation and opposing the generational smoking ban proposals that are alive in the Massachusetts legislature. Today, and we provided written testimony to this legislation. Today, there's a hearing on a Wisconsin bill that would essentially eliminate the predicate date that you had to be in business in order to get a cigar bar license in Wisconsin. This legislation successfully got through committee in the Wisconsin House in a bipartisan fashion, successfully got through the Wisconsin House of Representatives, and today is getting a hearing in a Senate committee in about an hour. So we'll see how that, but we recognize and appreciate the efforts of Representative Nate Gustafson, who came to the PCA trade show in New Orleans last year and is a friend of the industry, a supporter of the industry, who's really spearheaded that legislation in Wisconsin. In the last several hours, literally sort of CNN breaking news here, we got notice of the refiling of a cigar bar bill in Ohio. We've previously endorsed this legislation. It was introduced on a bipartisan basis. It received some bipartisan support last fall. The sponsoring legislator has reintroduced it and will be supporting that legislation in Ohio. Now I'm going to go through a punch list of states on things to anticipate and or still active in state legislatures around the country. The possibility of flavor ban legislation being reintroduced in Maine, and hopefully we're going to be working with advocates in the Maine legislature to work on rolling back that horrible tax increase that was passed last year. Connecticut anticipate flavor ban legislation coming back. New York is the proverbial across the board, the good legislation and the bad. Absolutely, there will be tax cap legislation reintroduced in New York. Cigar bar legislation will be reintroduced in New York. And then on the other side of the equation, we anticipate legislation on tax increase, flavor bans, and assorted other mischievous legislation being reintroduced in New York. New Jersey, bipartisan support for tax cap legislation in New Jersey. Excuse me. And cigar bar bill being refiled in the great state of Maryland, and tax cap legislation reintroduced in the state of Virginia. Georgia, we've been doing some planning efforts, and this is associated with our tax cap study that'll be coming up very, very soon. a professional economic analysis on the impact of tax caps, both proposed and enacted, and that will come into play in not only the New York and Virginia legislation, but assorted other states. And with that, we need to keep our eye out on Georgia, principally because of a special joint subcommittee that was, this is their word, study the economic impact and study the impact of smoking. Even though, and I watched about 6 to 8 hours of legislative testimony in Georgia on this, um, the word cigars and even other tobacco products wasn't brought up. It was really circulated around vape and e-cigarettes. But anytime you talk about OTP taxes, it can sweep us up into something that's a much bigger target. So we need to keep our eye on Georgia coming into January of 26. Um, Likewise, I just mentioned Ohio cigar bar bill. We've got to keep an eye on the possibility of a tax increase being reintroduced in Ohio. Tax cap legislation will be reintroduced in the state of Illinois. There will be a diligent effort to try to revisit the tax increase and raising of the tax cap in Indiana. We always have to be diligent in protecting the tax cap in Minnesota. Local authority legislation, both good and bad, will be reintroduced, no doubt, in Missouri. Local authority legislation possibility reintroduced in Oklahoma. We've got to watch the tax proposals in South Dakota and North Dakota. And the proverbial problem child in the West, and I'm not talking about California for once, the state of Washington, which last year had freestanding legislation to roll back their tax cap, a tax increase, and a flavor ban. So we have to keep an eye out because I think all three of those sector bills will be back in the state of Washington. Possibilities, good possibility of a more positive cigar bar bill being reintroduced in the state of Montana. Cigar bar legislation will definitively be reintroduced in the state of Kentucky, and we had a good conversation with the sponsor of that legislation at our cigar event earlier this back in the summer with the National Conference of State Legislatures, where it was simply a time factor, and they ran out of time in the Senate. It successfully passed the Kentucky House, so that bill will be back in Kentucky to open up cigar bar legislation throughout that Commonwealth. We're going to have to protect the tax cap again in New Mexico and keep an eye on the state of Oregon. So, with that, that's sort of a view from East Coast to West Coast, Josh, as to what the crystal ball says today. I'll throw in that some diligent efforts from PCA board member Tony Goins on reintroducing a tax cap measure in Nebraska is making tangible progress and has a legislative sponsor now at this time. And before I totally turn it over to you, will you anticipate the usual package of 50 pieces of legislation in the state of Hawaii, uh, both good, bad, and indifferent, but it seems that nothing ever successfully gets through that legislature anyway. So with that, any thing that you think I left out, Josh, that we ought to touch upon?
Just a little bit of further detail on California. The lawsuit, we have filed a state and federal level lawsuit. This was initiated by Cigar Rights of America. The PCA is a party to that lawsuit. Several of the CRA member companies are also parties to this lawsuit, challenging the UTL scheme. I think that this is a problematic arrangement for a variety of different reasons. The revenue analysis is way off. And this was done through emergency action without a lot of, there was no response to a lot of our input that we provided to the office there. So certainly something that we are actively monitoring closely. And I know the latest filing occurred earlier this morning. The first hearing, I believe, is set to be scheduled on November 24th. for that. But there is both a state level and a federal level challenge to the California unflavored tobacco list registry.
I also want to add to that, we're getting an onslaught of local government licensing bills in really large metropolitan areas and some smaller jurisdictions throughout the country. We're going to be chiming in on those to point out the difference in licensing a traditional smoke shop versus a premium cigar tobacconist. We filed one in a small community in Illinois a couple of weeks ago, Antioch, Illinois. But in the last 5 days, we've just noticed an onslaught of these licensing bills, which could add to the cost of doing business. So we're going to be letting our objections know and how that our sector of the tobacco world should be differentiated. And so immediately on the top of the order of those is a pending proposal that's being developed by the Planning Commission in the city of New Orleans. And in the last almost 48 hours, new licensing bills have been introduced and ordinances have been introduced in Los Angeles County and Baltimore, Maryland. So we're going to be reviewing those ordinances to see if there's anything truly harmful or fees associated with them that our retail partners should be aware of.
Absolutely. And I know we're working on some updates in the tax structure with some folks in Illinois, but the reporting requirements have been very difficult to process. So there's been a couple of members that have reached out, um, encountering those issues, and we're working through those as they're submitting their OTP for tax collection purposes. So definitely no shortage of issues. We're seeing, the Food and Drug Administration, with the exception of the nicotine limits rule, there really hasn't been a ton of issues related to premium cigars at the forefront of the FDA at this stage. The nicotine limits is something that hasn't been really moving a whole lot, but it's still out there. We filed a comment on that earlier this year. Um, but certainly I've noticed this, and I'm sure you have more than I even, Glenn, is the influx of typically federal issues now shifting to the states and then even to the localities.
Well, I shared this article with our staff the other day. Um, it's there's a method to the madness because of the lack of regulatory action against the industry in Washington. The new head of the Campaign for Tobacco Free Kids went public in a presentation that it was time, and this is their words, it's time to move the battle to the states and localities. I mean, they've drawn their line in the sand and basically put out a notice to people like you and I that are advocates for the industry that this is exactly a part of their public game plan to shift the burden, to shift the regulatory messaging, to shift the tax burden to the states and localities because they're capable of running a ground game that marshals the huddled masses. And we've got to be equally as diligent. And we hope that our retail partners post cigaraction.org on their sites, that they encourage their customers and those watching this to sign up at cigaraction.org to receive our notices, to participate in our petition campaigns, to encourage them to reach out to their legislators at the state and local level, everything from the city hall to the state capitol, to let their presence be felt. And this is something you and I covered in our regional training sessions in the last month with our retail partners throughout the country, is that right now we've got to run a grassroots campaign, second to none, to ward off the regulatory and tax threats and to support the positive legislation that's obviously been modeled after successes in North Dakota and Connecticut on cigar bars. The fact that the fact that Kentucky and Maryland and Ohio and Wisconsin and planning efforts in Michigan, all circulating around exemptions for cigar lounges and cigar bars, is a positive testament that our message is getting out. But we've got an equally powerful basket beside us of threatening legislation that we need to be equally as diligent on. So it's
And
going to make for a busy 26.
And those are, all of those active alerts, those are perfect examples of ways that consumers, retailers, manufacturers can weigh in on, from the grassroots side of things. We sent out a notice on the situation in Nicaragua, which I'm sure is top of mind with the Section 301 investigation. I'm not going to say too much beyond the statement that we already released, but I will emphasize the point that this is not a grassroots advocacy campaign. Writing into the comment docket is ill-advised at this stage. I would encourage folks, if you want to remain active in advocacy and be involved, look at some of those state alerts that Glenn has referenced and some of the local ones that we'll be working on in the next week or so. Final thoughts, Glenn?
Cigar Action. Can't say it enough. CigarAction.org. It's your real-time portal to stay abreast of the issues confronting us in every state in the union. So, folks, we'll be diligent at getting out our notices in real time to our state partners about legislation as we go into 26. But we've got to boost those numbers and get our consumers to sign up to engage in our grassroots campaigns.
Yep. And then just for folks that will be traveling out for Cigar Aficionados Big Smoke this weekend in Las Vegas, Glenn and I hope to see you there. We'll be there on Saturday, meeting with folks and answering questions on a myriad of different topics. But we wish them the best of luck in hosting what is a marquee event in the cigar industry.
I think this will be about my 20th one in one time or another. So there's nothing like 4,000 passionate cigar consumers gathering together in Las Vegas. And you and I will be at the seminar sessions to answer questions and to see our manufacturing partners on Saturday afternoon this time. So I think it's a testament. And I've said this many, many times in the past. It's a testament to the cigar patrons of this country that on a Saturday, that Cigar Aficionado will sell out a seminar to expand your educational understanding of great cigars that are being manufactured for our patrons across the country. What other industry or sector will 500 people show up on a Saturday in Las Vegas to learn more about the wonders of cigars? That's always amazed me. And to have a picture of that seminar session where people show up to learn more about this fabulous industry in Las Vegas has always been an amazing thing to me. So I look forward, Josh and I both look forward to seeing everybody at the seminars as well as the Big Smoke itself.
Sounds good. Well, thank you all. Have a good rest of your week.